Welcome back to another video on making 2D games in Unity. Today we're going to start looking at building an interaction system into our game where we can walk up to objects and then pick them up, possibly store them into an inventory, use them to interact with other objects, things of that matter. So in our game here, I've added a key, I've added a little potion, I've got a door over here that currently is closed and locked that I can't walk through. And so we're going to start looking at how can we build a system where we can actually interact with these objects, pick them up, store them, and use them. So we're going to work on this key here first. And what we want to do is build kind of a general purpose script here that we can put on any of our interactable objects that will allow us to interact with them. So let's go to the key out here in the hierarchy, and let's make a new script, and let's just call this interaction object. Alright, I'm going to attach that to the key. Alright, and then let's open that script up in MonoDevelop. In this interaction object script, we want to be able to store some information about the object that it's going to be attached to so that we can get that information back out when we walk up to it. One of the things that we're going to do is we're going to have an interaction range, so we need to put a collider on our object so that it knows when our player is within range to actually interact with it. So let's go back out to Unity here. Let's go on the key here. Let's add to the key a 2D circle collider. And then let's make this a little bit bigger. This is the area that we have to be touching with our collider for our player to be able to interact with it. So let's pull that radius up a bit, maybe to somewhere like here, maybe about a 0.85, so that when our player walks into this, it will trigger something, right? So we're going to make this a trigger collider right here. So we'll make sure all of our interactable objects have a trigger collider on them of some sort that we can trigger. We're also going to want to tag our objects as interactable objects so that we can differentiate what it is that we've run into here as well. So let's go ahead and add a tag for that in our tag manager here. That's a long name. Let's just call it InterObject, like that. And then let's go back out here and let's go ahead and tag this as an InterObject. Okay, so let's set this up so when the player walks into this trigger collider, the player is going to get some information about what this key is here and what it can do with it. Alright, so that means in our player script we want to detect when we've walked into this trigger collider so that we can take some action. So let's go take a look at our player's script that he's currently using, which is this top-down player movement script. I think we will make a new script here actually to handle interaction with objects. We don't get a huge long script there. So let's go in and make another new script here. And let's call this player interact for now. And then we'll go ahead and attach that to our skeleton here so that he gets this player interact script. And this script's going to take care of all the interactions that we're going to do with objects. So let's open up that script in MonoDevelop. Okay, so player interact is going to need, let's get rid of all of this for right now. Right now all it needs is the function that will automatically run when we walk into a trigger collider, and that's called trigger enter 2D. And then we want to be able to capture information about the object that we walked into. So we're going to do collider 2D, and we'll call it other. So that'll store information about the object that the player just walked into the trigger collider of. First thing we're going to want to do is check to see if that object's collider that we walked into is tagged as one of those inter objects. So we're going to say if other, and we'll use the compare tag command, and then we can specify the tag here. It was inter object, like that, I believe. Let's verify that out here so we don't get an error on the key. Yes, inter object, just like that. So if we walk into it as the inter object, we want to be able to get some information from that object as to what it is. So let's just for now do a debug log, and let's just say let's just have it give us the name. So let's say other dot name. Alright, so I'll just put the name in the console, what we walked into when we walk into that object's range there. So let's see if that works for us. Alright, so here we are, and as we walk into the area here, alright, see, as soon as we cross the line here with our player, we got in our console that this is the key. Okay, so we would put something probably on screen in some UI that would, you know, say, you know, do you want to pick up the key? You know, push the interact button, which we'll set up maybe as the E button on our keyboard to be able to pick things up. But at this point, we know that we have something that we're in range of that we can interact with. All right, so once that happens, we want to actually store this object as something that we can currently interact with. So this is our current object that we can interact with. So let's make a variable up here. We'll just make a game object variable, and we'll call this current object. This will be the current object that we can interact with. Matter of fact, let's call it current inter obj, like that. Yeah, and let's make this a capital I so it's easier to read. Current inter object will be the object that we can currently interact with. So at the point where, and actually let's set this to null at the beginning so that it's empty, and then when we walk into a trigger collider that's got an interactable object tag on it, let's set that to our current inter object. So equals other, and then we'll have to say dot game object. Let's go ahead and store the whole game object there. Okay, and then let's go ahead and make this public for now so we can watch this out in the inspector. So when we go back now and we click in on our skeleton and we look here in his player interact script, we see we got current inter object right here. There's nothing there. When we hit play, and then when we walk down here and get into its range, you can see now that we have got the key stored in this variable here. So now we have a direct link to the object in our script that we can do things with. Okay. Now, if we walk out of range of this object, we also want to be able to not interact with it anymore. So we have to have a way of kind of clearing that out when we get out of range. So we're going to use another function in here called onTriggerExit2D. And onTriggerExit2D is very similar to onTriggerEnter, except that it runs the first frame that we are no longer in the trigger collider of another object. So we want a collider 2D variable here. We'll call it other again. So in this case, same thing. Matter of fact, we're just going to copy and paste here a little bit, save some time. So if it's the inter object that we just left, we'll check to see if it's our current interactable object, so we'll say if other dot game object is equal to current inter object. So we'll do a little check there. And if that's the object that we just walked out of range of, then what we want to do is say current inter object equals null. So we'll empty that out. Okay. Now if we just walk through something else that happens to have a trigger collider on it that's not an interactable object, then we won't worry about it. Okay, so this will just handle those weird times where maybe we have objects too close together. Technically, you wouldn't want to ever have these overlapping or too close together where you could get two hits, because that could cause some confusion with our inter object here. All right, so when we enter trigger collider, that's an inter object. Then we're going to go ahead and grab that and store it. And when we leave, if it's the one that we currently have selected, then we're out of range of that one, and we'll set it to null. We'll see how that works there. So now when we go out here into Unity, we should see as we walk in and out of here, so let's go down. Okay, so we have the key, and when we leave the keys collider, it goes away. See that? Current object is now none. Now we have it, now we don't. So that's all based on if we're close enough to interact with it or not. So that's kind of the first step in building this system, is being able to know when we can interact with an object and what the object is. Okay, and then the next step of this would be actually to set up a key press where we can actually interact with it, whether it's pick it up or use it or put it in our inventory or whatever. Okay, so next step then in our players interact script here will be to put in an update function, because now we want to be able to check for some input here for interacting. So let's set up a key that we can use for interaction, and in a lot of games that happens to be the E key on the keyboard. So let's go into Unity and let's see if we can set up an input in our input manager. So we're going to go to Edit, Project Settings, Input, and let's just make ourselves a new input here, or we could actually just take over Fire 3. We're already using Fire 1 and Fire 2, but let's go ahead and take over Fire 3, and we can rename this as Interact. This will be our Interact key. The button that we want to use is the E key on the keyboard. We won't assign any alternate buttons right now. This is already set up to work with a key or a mouse button, so it should be fine. So now, when we push the E button, that is known as the Interact button. So if we want to interact, E is our key. Alright, so we will go back into our script here, and now we can say if, and we can say input, get button down, and the button we want is the Interact button that I just set up in there. So if we push the Interact button, first we have to check to see, do we have a current interactable object? So we have to do that check. So we could actually just do that right up here in line. We could just do an AND statement here, and we can say and current interactable OBJ. So if we have something in here, this will be true. If we don't have anything in here, this will be false. Okay, so if we have an actual object that we can interact with in range and we push our interact button, then we want to interact with it. So here's what we're going to do something with the object. Okay, and that could be different for different objects. So we'll probably build some flexibility into this so we can do different things. But for now, let's just have that object maybe turn itself off, you know, kind of like we've picked it up. So if we were going to pick this key up, we would want it to disappear from the screen, and we would want to keep track of the fact that we actually have that object, and we would probably store it in some sort of an inventory system. And I think we'll get into an inventory system in a different video. But for now, what we can do is we can tell that object to do something. All right. So in its script, the key script or the interactable object script, we will have some sort of a function that's set up for it to run when it is interacted with. Okay. So in this case, let's say we're going to store it in an inventory. So let's just send a message to this object that we're interacting with. So we'll say current interObject.send message, and let's send it a message that we're going to let's say do interaction. Okay, so we'll make a function over there in the interactable object script called do interaction, which will do whatever code it's supposed to do in that script. Okay, so we'll save this. Let's go over here to our interactable object script. Let's go ahead and put in that function void do interaction. And let's make this public so it's visible from outside of this object. And for now, let's just make this like we're going to picked up and maybe put in inventory. Okay, this will be kind of what we're going to pretend is happening here. For now though, let's just have this object make itself disappear. We don't want to destroy it, because if we're going to store it, we want to keep it active in the scene, but we do want to make it invisible and so it doesn't interact with things anymore. So for now, let's just turn its game object off and we'll see what happens there. Okay, so we'll say game object dot set active false, and this will cause this game object to disappear. Its code will shut off. It'll do all of that. Okay, so if we've got this set up right, when I walk up to it and I hit my E key, we should see this key disappear because we're sending a message to it to do its interaction. So let's check and see if we got it all right. So let's walk up to it till we know we have it. There we go. We can see the key is in range because we got the message, and if I push E, the key has now disappeared. Now it's still here. See it in the hierarchy? It's just been turned off. This is just basically what we did, is we turned off its key, and then in our player script we would get into the next piece, which is where we're going to store this key in inventory. Okay, so that's probably enough for this first chunk here. I'm building some interactivity into objects by walking up to them and being able to do something with them when we push a key. In the next video, we will look at how to store objects into an inventory system, and we can also look at setting up some conditions where maybe interacting isn't picking it up, but it's using it right away. So we'll take a look at a few different options. There's many ways and many things we can do here in a system like this. It really depends on what you're going for in your game, and you're going to have to tailor it to your specific needs, but this is the general ways that you can do things like this. So I hope this was helpful and that you enjoyed it. Please leave comments below if you have any questions, and thanks for watching.